It was a picture-perfect California morning, the kind that makes you forget a war is on. August 16th, 1942. The fog had burned off the Golden Gate, and the sun sparkled on the Pacific. From Treasure Island Naval Station in San Francisco Bay, a U.S. Navy airship, designated L-8, cast off its moorings at just past 6 in the morning. It was a small, non-rigid blimp, 150 feet long, filled with helium, used for coastal patrol. Its mission that day was routine. Fly a patrol loop out to the Farallon Islands and back, looking for any signs of Japanese submarines that might be lurking off the coast. The threat was real. Just 8 months prior, a Japanese sub had shelled an oil refinery near Santa Barbara. The L-8 carried 2 experienced crewmen, Pilot Lieutenant Ernest DeWitt Cody, 27, and his co-pilot Ensign Charles Ellis Adams, 38. Cody was a skilled, by-the-book naval aviator. Adams was a former enlisted ballonatic who had worked on the iconic airships Akron and Macon. They were a solid team. The blimp itself was in perfect working order. It was so trusted, in fact, that it had been used just months before to film footage for the Hollywood movie, I Wanted Wings. As the L-8 droned west over the Golden Gate Bridge, a sight that had become a symbol of home front resilience, fishermen and early beachgoers waved up at the familiar silhouette. It was the last completely normal moment in the story of the Ghost Blimp. The first hint of trouble was subtle. Around 7:50 a.m., a Pan Am pilot flying a clipper ship reported seeing the L-8 about 15 miles west of the Golden Gate, descending through a low cloud layer. That wasn't necessarily alarming. Pilots often dropped down for a closer look at suspicious objects. But then, at 10:49 a.m., a coastal lookout post reported an odd sight. The L-8, now far off its intended patrol track, flying erratically and very low over the ocean near Mile Rock, just south of the Golden Gate. It appeared to be in distress, but not the kind caused by enemy fire. There was no smoke, no visible damage. It was just listless. Then the blimp began to behave in a way that defied all logic. It started to climb, reaching an altitude of about 2,000 feet, and drifted inland over the peninsula. It passed directly over Fort Funston, where soldiers in an anti-aircraft battery watched it with growing confusion. They saw no crew movement in the gondola. The blimp seemed to be pilotless. By now, the Navy was alert. Chase planes were scrambled from Mills Field, but the L-8 was no longer following the rules of aeronautics or warfare. It became a ghost ship of the sky, a silent silver envelope carried by the wind. The denouement of this mystery was as public as it was bizarre. The L-8 drifted southeast, losing helium and altitude slowly. It first made landfall at about 11:15 a.m., its dangling draglines snagging on the cliffs at Fort Funston, and then on the Olympic Country Club golf course, where it deposited 2 of its depth charges, which thankfully did not arm onto the fairway. Now significantly lighter, the blimp rose again, continuing its eerie journey. It crossed over the Sunset District of San Francisco, a residential area, where thousands of people looked up from their Sunday routines to see a U.S. Navy blimp, clearly in trouble, floating silently overhead. Children pointed, mothers gathered on porches. It was a surreal intrusion of the war into a quiet neighborhood. Finally, its helium nearly gone, the L-8 made its final, gentle descent. It came down not on a military field, not in the ocean, but on a quiet residential street in Daly City. It nosed into the ground at the corner of Bellevue and Elm, its envelope crumpling across the street and onto a rooftop, the gondola coming to rest in the middle of the road. The time was approximately 11:30 a.m. Within minutes, the local police officer and a newsboy were on the scene. What they found, or more accurately, what they didn't find, would become the core of an 80-year mystery. The scene was perfectly preserved, a locked room mystery in the open air. The blimp's engines were still idling. The radio was tuned to the correct frequency and was functional. The microphone was hanging out of the gondola, as if someone had been using it. The gondola door was latched open. Most significantly, the life raft was still securely stowed in its compartment. The pilot's personal gear, their caps, a freshly packed lunch, even Cody's wallet with his money and identification was all in place. Only two things were missing: the two life jackets and the two pilots. It was as if Cody and Adams had simply stepped out for a moment, mid-flight. There were no signs of a struggle, no evidence of foul play, no blood, no scorch marks from an explosion. The depth charges, aside from the two dropped earlier, were still safely aboard and unarmed. The Navy descended on the site within the hour. They were utterly baffled. The initial frantic thought was that the pilots had fallen out, but that made no sense. Why would both men, experienced aviators, be outside the gondola at the same time over the open ocean? And if one had fallen, wouldn't the other have radioed for help or tried to control the aircraft? The door was found latched open, not broken or jammed. It suggested a deliberate exit, but to what end? The Navy launched an immediate and massive search. The ocean along the Blimp's flight path was scoured by ships and aircraft. The coastline was combed. No bodies were ever found. Not a shred of clothing, not a life jacket washed ashore. The official court of inquiry, held in the days that followed, was left with nothing but unsettling theories. The most plausible, and the one the Navy officially settled on, was that one of the pilots had somehow fallen out while investigating something over the side, a possible oil slick, a suspicious object, and the other, in attempting a rescue, had fallen out as well. This theory tried to explain the open door and the missing life jackets, perhaps donned for a closer look over water. But it had gaping holes. The Blimp's controls were found in neutral. If one man remained, even for a second, he would have likely thrown the engines into emergency power or grabbed the radio. The other theory was a mid-air accident, like a sudden gust throwing one man out and the other losing his balance. Yet the complete lack of any distress call remained the glaring, inexplicable fact. Conspiracy theories, of course, flourished. Had they been snatched by a Japanese submarine? Impossible at the altitude and location. Did they defect? Absurd, with all their belongings left behind. Had they encountered a UFO? A concept barely in the public lexicon in 1942. The mystery was a perfect Rorschach test for the anxieties of the time. The aftermath was almost as strange as the event. The L-8 itself was repaired and returned to service, nicknamed the Ghost Blimp by sailors who were superstitious about flying in it. It served without further incident for the rest of the war and was eventually scrapped. But the fate of Cody and Adams was officially listed as unknown, a rare and unsatisfying conclusion for the U.S. Navy. Their names are on the tablets of the missing at the Golden Gate National Cemetery. The case remains open. In the decades since, no new evidence has emerged. The Ghost Blimp stands alongside Flight 19 as one of the great enduring aviation mysteries of World War II, but with a chillingly intimate twist. It wasn't lost in a remote jungle or the vast Atlantic. It returned to the heart of America, landing on a suburban street, to deliver its mystery right to the nation's doorstep. It's a story that lacks the closure of a battle or the clarity of a crash. It is, instead, a haunting ellipsis in the historical record. Two men, veterans of a mighty war machine, vanished during a routine, peaceful morning flight, leaving behind a perfectly operational aircraft to complete the journey without them. In the end, the Ghost Blimp doesn't give us answers. It only asks, over and over, in the silent hum of its idling engines and the latch of its open door, what could make two experienced pilots simply walk away from a flying aircraft into the empty sky? It is a mystery that floats unmoored in history, as elusive today as it was on that sunny August morning in 1942.